Hello, friends. Here we are at chapter 15 of the dialogue. Becoming and the Principles of Creation is the title of this chapter. So it's an interesting perspective, like taking the whole idea of creation and applying it to what's happening to you. So we begin with the three principles of creation. So we start broad. The first, in verse 15:2, the first principle of creation is that of movement. Where there's life, there's movement. When God spoke, being moved into form. Okay, this is really foundational and fundamental for your understanding. So it wasn't something else. It wasn't like God, this separated being, spoke, and then this stuff called matter happened. No. God itself, beingness itself, the one, moved into form. When we see this, we can recognize that everything that we experience as form is sourced from the same place. It's sourced from the one being. So even the chair you're sitting in is sourced from God, is God, being moved into form. This is a fundamental understanding that allows us to move away from seeing a separated world where here I am over in my space and there is that lamp in its space, and there's space between us and I'm here and you're there. This is a recognition that beingness itself is expressing through everything. So the first principle we return to then is movement. This is what happens in creation. So movement is actually a modulation, a change in frequency of beingness. Verse 3, movement is energy, the life force of creation and being, both in unity and in time. By being, you are in movement. So this movement of energy is true both when you recognize your oneness with everything and experience your oneness with everything, and when you are experiencing yourself as a being in time. It's still the animating force behind everything. Movement is an essential component. And you can notice this. I mean, it's what stays the same? Nothing. In fact, that's one of the great comforts when you're in a place that's painful. Like, okay, this won't last forever. I know it's going to change because everything changes. I also know this really good thing that's happening is going to change too, because everything changes. Movement is part of creation. Verse 4. The second principle of creation then is that being is. In other words, it exists. There's a consciousness is, awareness is. This is the energy that quantum physicists are starting to recognize. They're starting to see that everything's made out of the same stuff. Like it's in different frequencies and taking different forms, but it all comes down to the same foundational thing, which is actually vibration. So there's the second principle, is there's one foundational energy. and it composes all that is. So we have this energy that's moving. Okay? Then we move to verse 5, which tells us the third component of creation. Life is movement through the force of expression. The third principle of creation is thus expression. So not only is it just moving at random, like any movement of being is creation, but no, every movement, every modulation is expression of that one beingness, that one energy. And this is creation. These are not separate principles, but a single principle of wholeness. Movement, being, expression. They happen as one. They're just different components of one thing. So I thought it was interesting that even in the traditional creation story, we can see this principle. In the Bible, it talks about how the wind moved. There's the movement. There was God, which is being. And then there was sound, which is the expression. The first day of creation, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. That's from Genesis. So we have movement. It's not staying the same. God, which is the essence, the energy, the source, and light, which is a change in vibration and expression. Verse 11. Time is what begins and ends. Time is what began when life took on existence in form and space. It is temporal rather than eternal. So I know that there has been a tendency in our efforts to recognize the hugeness of what's actually happening here, to think about things that happen in time and space with the sort of a disdain. But if the one is expressing through time, space, form, then that's part of its expression. So everything that's happening here is an intentional, conscious expression, and is by its very nature, by its very existence, holy and sacred, and obviously approved of by the universe, or it wouldn't be happening. So we're trying to take this down now to a personal level of what do you do with all this theory? Think about the idea of passing through. We've been through this before. You were taught to develop a relationship with all that passes through you. And by relationship, again, we mean joining. We don't mean attachment. We mean joining what's passing through. What you allow to pass through you is the eternal coming to replace the temporal. So what happens is, as you remain as the eternal, then that which is passing through, you are in unity with, you are in relationship with the expression, which is temporal. And that's where the magic happens. That's where union happens, where the passing events, passing experience is recognized and accepted by that which does not change. Verse 15. Continual and unblocked and aware pass-through is what we now consider. Now, you're going to find, and I'm sure you have found throughout this book, we keep coming at pretty much the same concept from different points of view, using different language, using different metaphors. And that's because we get different things from it in different ways. Language is limited, and what we're talking about here is unlimited. So we use language as best we can to point, and that's what's happening here. So he's referring to continual, unblocked, and aware pass-through. So what does that look like? As I am experiencing my existence here, there's movement, there's expression that happens. There's things that come and go. There's changing phenomenon. There are beings who come in and out of my life. There are sensations that come in and out of my experience. And when I allow on a continual basis and that to happen, and I don't try to block anything, I don't attach to anything, I don't run from everything, I'm just aware, that's what we're looking toward. Just like the wind provides great power when it's allowed to pass through. I mean, it can go through a windmill and provide great power to do all kinds of things. So can spirit endlessly empower when it is allowed to pass through you unimpeded. Take that in for a minute. Just like the wind moving through the windmill powers a huge variety of functions, so too does this movement of God energy, when it is allowed to pass through you unimpeded, empower you in your human experience. The constant and continual presence of unblocked pass-through is all that is needed in order for you to be in constant relationship with your own power, the very power that has always animated your being. Now, why is this? Why is this? Why does this give you so much power? And notice what it's saying. You're in constant relationship with your own power. So you are actually not moving. That which is moving through you is moving. You are not. So you might think, oh wait, my thoughts, I'm my feelings, I'm my emotions. No. They're more phenomenon that's passing through you. So this idea is that you are the constant. You are resting in your own energy, and the movement is passing through you. Remember that your thinking mind plays no part in maintaining or sustaining your relationship to unity. This cannot be learned, but it must be practiced. So your head is of no use here. We begin with maintenance. So I like this idea because it's not saying, okay, do this overnight. It's saying, let's just try to maintain this for a while. So when you maintain something, you're not building it, you're just maintaining it. You're just keeping it in good order. So the definition of maintenance is keeping what you have in good repair. You have something of value that you wish to take care of, so it will be of service to you. It requires an attitude of vigilance. That's where you are right now. You have something of value, which is your own beingness and is your experience here. And you want to take care of it because obviously it's here to serve you, even if you don't understand how or why yet. And as you maintain an attitude of vigilance, now you're able to maintain this thing of value. And it's temporary, by the way. So verse 19. And so we begin with the idea of maintenance of your relationship with unity. Unity again being joining everything. You wish it to continue to serve you. You thus must strive to maintain the conditions that will allow it to do so. This is, as with all maintenance, a temporary measure. So how do you do this? Well, if you're maintaining your house, you can't only pay attention to the yard because stuff's going to happen in the house. You can't only pay attention to the plumbing. What you do is you just maintain the conditions. So you try to foster this place of allowing everything to pass through. That's the kind of maintenance that we're talking about. And he says some breaks in service will still occur. guess he, guess we pretty much know he knows what being a human is like. The connection won't be perfect, but it will keep the power in service to you. So there is not an expectation of sudden accomplishment and a perfect continuous connection. But as you encounter places where you're attached, so you can consciously release your attachment and watch it and look at it and see and allow it to pass through you. Even the attachment itself, you can look at it and go, oh, I'm really attached there. Let me just see what that feels like. And then it comes and it goes, and you stay the same. In order to recognize unity as sustenance, so now he's talking about sustenance rather than maintenance, because that's what we want. We don't want to just remember sometimes. We want to be able to sustain this, because this is where happiness lies in the human experience, and that's what we're really after. To recognize unity as sustenance is to recognize it as that which sustains life. Maintenance will lead to sustenance. So when the recognition happens that, like, oh, this is the source of life itself, when that happens, then you won't need to have any effort trying to get back. And it happens in its own time, and it happens gradually, usually. In order to accomplish this, we need to maintain the conditions that allow unity to be present. So there's a review of the conditions that he lays out. It's not a function of the mind. No analyzing or figuring out is necessary. You don't have to sit there and make notes and remind yourself and put sticky notes everywhere to remind you it's not the mind. You allow pass-through of all transitory experience. So in this case, you can catch something and go, I'm really love this. I want this to continue. I'm afraid it's going to stop. And you can catch yourself and recognize, no, I'm just going to let this come and go. I'm going to let it be what it is, and I'm going to allow my feelings of wanting to sustain it come and go as well. They're a phenomenon too. And we prioritize movement in the coming and going of circumstances. In other words, we allow circumstances to change and don't consider something wrong when they do. Being, by resting in the awareness of what is, we become familiar and intimate with our own sense of being. And expression, and this is even on an individual basis, by following the promptings that come from this state of union. So thoughts which try to come from the conditioned mind and are trying to boss you around and tell you what's wrong and what you need to fix, that's not expression. Expression is that which comes up and says, I think I'd really like to do this right now. And it comes from an unattached place as a kind of a prompting. So you have left behind the conditions of learning because they are no longer needed. You're now in the time of becoming. What are you becoming? You're becoming the Christ. That's pretty exciting. What you gain here is beyond effort, the maintenance of a state that rejects the conditions of learning. So what are the conditions of learning? I mean, it might be good to examine that and figure that out for yourself. Listening to the mind, for one. Thinking that you're the one that has to fix everything and do everything, applying effort, for another. Trying to gain wisdom from knowledge, from the world, from your conditioning in your culture. Those are all conditions of learning, and there are many more. We've tried everything, and it's time to just let that go. And allow the conditions of unity to be there, where we just allow our experience to pass through. We allow circumstances to come and go. We rest in awareness of what is, what's happening here, what am I feeling here, what's my experience now. And we express by following those inner promptings that come as a result of this state. So that's what's being asked of you right now. What you gain here is beyond effort, the maintenance of a state that rejects the conditions of learning. And what you gain will never leave you, but will sustain you forevermore. So it may feel as if you're just don't have it perfect yet, and I haven't gotten it right yet, so I must not be getting anything out of this because I keep slipping back into attachment, or I keep feeling like I'm a separated being. But here's a promise that's given. What you gain from doing this will sustain you forevermore. The work that you're doing here is the highest calling a human being can have. This is the road to remembering who you are and what's going on, and is worthy of your attention. So thank you for joining me for this chapter, and I look forward to meeting you again in chapter 16.